Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. We'll get started in just a minute. Awesome. Thanks all for joining. We're going to give ourselves one more minute to get started. Awesome. So I think we'll go ahead and get the conversation started. We're still waiting for one of our panelists who's a state senator, and has a ton of votes today. So we're hoping he joins us shortly, but looking forward to the conversation. For those joining us, we'd love for you to please utilize the chat during today's conversation. Please introduce yourselves, your role, and where you're joining us from. And also, if you have questions for our panelists throughout the conversation, please put them in the chat and we can respond accordingly. Well, with that, I will get us started. So hi, everyone. My name is Taylor Mag, and I'm the Director of Workforce Development Policy for PPI. I lead our New Skills for a New Economy project, and I would like to welcome everyone to our 5th webinar in our Future of High School series. This series is done in partnership with my project, as well as the 74 and PPI's Reinventing America Schools team. For brief background, PPI is a think tank in DC that's mission is to create and promote bold and pragmatic policy solutions that solve America's most pressing challenges. Education and workforce are 2 issues the organization is highly focused on. That's why last spring we kicked off this series highlighting examples that are working at the intersection of these 2 systems to transform the status quo and integrate not only high quality academic coursework, but career learning and experiences as well. Throughout this series, we've highlighted college and career pathway models in PG County, Maryland, Purdue Polytechnic High School in Indiana, health career pathways in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, and many more. Today, we're headed to Colorado to discuss ways the state and its leaders are expanding high-quality career pathways in energy-related fields. This work is increasingly important, especially as our nation is bumping up against serious labor constraints for filling green jobs, facing challenges ensuring workers have the right skills for these positions. The conversation today will highlight the nonprofit LIRA's Climatarium initiative, which brings together education, industry, and policy partners to build climate-related college and career pathways for young people across the state. Participants will also hear from school district leaders participating in LIRA's Climatarium work, as well as state policymakers who are championing legislation to scale these efforts through a seal of climate literacy, a high school diploma endorsement open to Colorado students. This conversation is critically important as it will inform reforms needed to ensure the U.S. education system adapts to meet current workforce needs with a focus on pathways that incorporate technical and durable green skills that will lead to greater economic opportunity for our nation's young people and, in this instance, help tackle our nation's climate crisis. So with that, I'm going to provide brief introductions of our wonderful panel, and we'll start getting into the questions. So first, we have Mary Sewell, who is the CEO and founder of LIRA. Mary, I know you have such a robust background in this space, so please, in your intro in your Q&A, please provide more of your great background to our attendees today. And we have Dr. Karen Chesser, who is the superintendent of Durango School District. Karen, thank you so much for joining us. And similarly, please feel free to share more about your background and your answers. We also have Senator Chris Hansen joining us, who represents Colorado's District 31, which is Denver County. And he unfortunately is not joined yet because, again, he is votes, but should be on shortly to answer some questions about some of the legislation he's championing in the legislature. So with that, Mary, I'm going to pass it to you to kick us off and to further set the stage on today's topic. Do you mind outlining some of the climate realities facing Colorado right now and speak more to the work of your organization, LIRA? What's the mission? What are some initiatives you're running? And narrowing in, can you really speak to your Climatarium initiative and how this work is helping to not only solve some of the climate challenges you're going to talk about, but also how it's helping to transform education and also support regional economic development work?
Absolutely. So Taylor, thank you so much for creating this opportunity. Senator Hansen is also just joining. So hi, Chris. Hi, Karen. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about our work and why we think what we're doing in Colorado is of interest and could be hopefully instructive to other locations and places. So Colorado, like many states in the country, like maybe probably every state in the country, is feeling the impacts around climate change. And because we are a rural state that is both agriculture and tourism and recreation, it's really impacting our economy. And we are seeing, as we sort of look forward, all the ways that could really change us as a state. So an example is Jobs for the Future recently created an assessment tool to analyze climate and economic resilience in all states. And so using data about climate patterns, housing, transportation, employment, demographics, and the political landscape, Colorado came out as something that is considered a critical state. So we are high risk. And that's because, as if you know much about the West, we're seeing forest fires, our snowpack is changing, which impacts both our winter recreation industry and also our summer recreation industry, like with river rafting. Forestry is dramatically changing. Agriculture is very much changing. So we are a state that is seeing on so many different fronts as early as now, like what is going to only probably increase and deepen around climate. And we want to help our state really be resilient economically, and also because we care so deeply about education that we are creating these educational opportunities for our kids. So Lyra, our work is that we support local communities and people really close to students and students themselves to create more educational opportunity. So we work with students and schools, school districts, and funders that are interested in accelerating their work beyond grant making. And we help students to build these proof points of innovation and then help them become sustainable through governance, fundraising, policy, legal, communication, and advocacy. And so when we look at climate, we have created this network or this initiative called Climatarium. And so we're working specifically with rural communities to support their locally built and created approaches to building college and career pathways related to the impacts of climate change. And so, as I said before, we know agriculture is changing, we know forestry is changing, energy is changing, construction trades are changing, the tourism industry is changing. All of these industries need to adapt, and Lyra and the work we do is trying to support that adaptation and that resilience so that kids can stay in these rural communities. And we also it's really important to us that these conversations are often not political. And we work in both very conservative and progressive communities. And because we are talking about opportunity for kids, it often gets through the political pieces and really creates a vibrant, interesting way to approach these issues, which we also care deeply about.
Thanks, Mary. And Senator Hansen, thank you so much for joining us. I know you have to go to a vote soon, so I'm actually going to pass it to you next, if that's okay. I know Mary just kind of set the stage more for why this work's so important and some of the state efforts she's working on. Do you mind if you can speak more about your efforts in the legislature in Colorado, some recent activity that you've pushed for, including the climate literacy seal, that can help really incentivize these efforts across the state? And Senator, adding another question to your question, just in case you do have to leave us, can you also speak to navigating the political environment right now and how you are working across the aisle to really build buy-in and awareness of the importance of these types of pathways for young people?
Yeah, Taylor, thank you. Two super important questions, and appreciate letting me go next because I think I'm going to get pulled back in to start to continue some votes here at the Capitol. We're in the final about 15 days of the session, and it's pretty intense right now. But I'm so glad to be able to join you for a few minutes. It was wonderful to work with Mary, work with wonderful superintendents like Dr. Chesser, and across the state trying to put together a piece of legislation around creating the climate seal. We've done this in some other areas like civics or biliteracy, and so it just seemed like a natural fit to extend this into climate and conservation education, experiential education that our students so badly need and want, and to support the efforts of places like Durango that have already been down this track and make that more broadly available across the state. So that was really the idea behind the seal of literacy legislation. I'm so glad to get that to the governor. It's signed. It was really amazing effort this year to get that on the books, and I'm hoping that lots of other states will be able to use that approach. This is very close to my heart. One, I've got two boys in high school who care deeply about the environment and experiential education in the outdoors. And I want them to be prepared for their careers in the future. And I certainly wanted this to be available for students all across the state. On your very good political question, I have found, like in all of our lives, right, it's tailoring the message to the audience. If I'm talking to my Democrat colleagues, I can talk very clearly about reducing carbon emissions and climate change and all of the civil S of the left. But if I'm talking to a more conservative colleague, I may need to change that up and really talk about conservation and workforce development and the tourism economy, right? All the things that make the Western Colorado in particular really vibrant and have vibrant economies. Those are things that are very bipartisan. So I think that's really how we tried to approach this bill. This was not a partisan effort. This was about helping our students get ready for the future. And so that's really what we focused on, and really happy to have been a part of it. And I am getting a text from my chairman right now that I have to go back and vote. So thanks for squeezing me in. I am sorry to have to run, but you are in very capable hands here when it comes to Colorado. Two of my favorites on the line with you today. And thanks for squeezing me in. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you so much. And good luck with the votes. Awesome. Well, I'm so glad we got a chance to hear from Senator Hansen, and I'm so glad he's voting right now and making more great things happen for Colorado. So I'm glad we got to see that in action. Dr. Chester, I'm going to pass it to you next to kind of expand on what Mary was saying, but also then Chris was saying as well. You and your district are part of this Climatarium Hub effort, which is really focused on the Southwest Colorado. It's called the hub is the Southwest Colorado Education Collaborative. Can you speak to your role in this partnership? What are you focusing on in your rural collaborative, and how has it helped to push the region forward in developing career pathways for young people and simultaneously addressing some of the workforce needs of your region?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. So first of all, I'm Karen Chesser. I am ending my third year as superintendent of the Durango School District, but I just signed on for 4 more and was previously a superintendent in the Kentucky, greater Cincinnati area. And I think, that gives me a unique perspective coming to another part of the United States and seeing that no matter where we are in the country, a changing climate, understanding environmental education, science, climate literacy is important to all of us, for different reasons. We are in Southwest Colorado, Durango, Four Corners, where we have beautiful waters, great ski resorts, amazing trees, but we also know that our entire way of life is impacted by how we take care of our planet. And our students are critically interested in that. And I'm happy to talk about the SEAL later and what our kids are doing. But one of the things we know is that we have got to have workers. We have to grow a workforce in this field of climate literacy, environmental science, natural resources, especially sort of in our neck of the woods here in Southwest Colorado, or Colorado in general. And so the Southwest Colorado Education Collaborative was created a little over 3 years ago. We received some federal and state grants, RISE grant, rural co-action grants. And these grants have brought our 9 school districts together in 4 different counties, all working towards the same vision. And that is that we're going to make sure our students have numerous experiential options, work-based learning experiences, concurrent enrollment or dual credit experiences, so that there's a seamless pipeline for them to go into green jobs. That's in the area of environmental science. We're also focusing on some other areas such as building trades, health science, hospitality, education. But for the environmental science pathway, we are so fortunate that Lyra has been working with us and supporting us in a partnership specifically with Fort Lewis College. Fort Lewis College is a Native American serving institution. I mean, are serving all students, but they do give free tuition to Native American students, so one of the most diverse populations and successfully graduating students in the country. And so the Environmental Climate Institute, ECI, was developed at Fort Lewis College, and we have very articulated pathways for our students in high school and even in middle school to start thinking about a career in natural resources, environmental science, river science, for example. And so that takes the place of everything from summer camps that are just continuing to fill up. Our kids are so excited about that, to job shadowing, to, again, actually having college classes in high school. And so we're already seeing that this is making an impact on not only students going into those careers, but even if they're in a different career, we call it sustainabilizing that career. So looking at having a sustainability attitude in no matter what career they're in. So yeah, and I didn't say that, I do chair the collaborative. So we have all of our superintendents are on board, no matter the size of the district, our higher ed institutions and our industries. So anyway, that's a little bit about what the collaborative's doing and the great work of Lyra and the Climatarian.
That's super helpful, Karen. And Mary and Karen, I'm actually going to ask you both a question before I move into the other ones that we prepped, just because I know Senator Hansen had to go. Can you speak a little bit more, because we got a question on this in the chat, on what does the seal look like, and and what is part of this climate endorsement? Karen, you kind of started to talk about a lot of that and what goes into the pathways that you're developing, but what would that mean for students who get that seal upon graduating high school?
Yeah, so our students are so excited and glad this passed, and they are committed to being, we hope there are others, but they will definitely be the first group that gets this. Graduation is just in about 3 or 4 weeks. We have 2 different high schools, Durango High School and a Big Picture High School. And those students are already on track to receive this seal. We have green teams at all of our schools in Durango. Our focus as a district has strongly been on sustainability. We have a sustainability committee that meets every 2 months for the last 3 years. We're doing a ton of energy performance plans. We have a soil outdoor inspiration lab. Happy to talk about that. But one of the things that came out of the sustainability committee were these green teams. And the green teams at every school have been very active in advocating for climate literacy, making a difference in conservation, making a difference in how we're composting, or honestly, how we're using our composted, what would typically be composted, how are we feeding animals, all kinds of strategies to really reduce waste. And our Durango High School Green Team now has about 80 members. And they have been, for the last 2 years, strongly committed to making an impact. In fact, I think it was 18 of the students actually went up to Denver, which, by the way, is 7.5 hours from Durango, in order to testify for this. They felt so strongly about it. We have, I think, you may have seen in the news that this generation of students, sometimes they're called the honey badgers. And we remember that 2010 viral video or meme about the honey badger that's not going to take no and is going to go after what it wants. And our kids today are like that. I really feel like they want to make an impact. They will persevere. They have grit. And sometimes they think, hey, you adults, you kind of messed up some things for us, especially when they think back, we even had a pandemic. And they're like, we're going to be the ones that fix this. And we are capitalizing on that and their energy and their work. And so with this seal, what that's going to do, it's going to be a recognition for our students as they graduate. As important as some of the other seals you talked about, maybe as important as being an AP scholar or wearing a certain cord. We want to make it at that level so that students are being recognized for the work. And not only that they're being recognized, they also will be able to carry that on to possibly a job application in the future, maybe an internship or work-based learning experience, or maybe on those college applications, so that they can truly have a strong pathway into those green jobs. And so they will get this seal. Our students right now are submitting information to show that they qualify for this. And I know Mary will talk a little bit more about it, but we have to make sure they've taken some coursework that aligns to climate literacy. And then they have to do an experiential project. And this has to be a pretty extensive project. So actually our green team students are the ones who created the submission form and the criteria to determine, what does it take to get credit for that project. They currently are including, descriptions, but also really looking at the impact of the project and a reflection. And who did they collaborate with to make this happen? And then how are they going to ensure there's a long-term impact? And how will it fit with their goals of the future? And so when our students are able to provide proof or evidence of this, reward them and recognize them. I mean, those are the many of the skills that we think are pretty important for the future.
Thanks, Karen. That was so wonderful. Mary, pass to you. Anything to add?
Well, I mean, not much, because I think Karen really illuminated this whole concept around the seal. So just some things to really just to augment what she said. It is a very accessible high school diploma endorsement, and that was by design. This is not just meant for your AP student, your college-bound student. This really is meant for any high school student, and we actually have some in middle school already thinking about this, that are trying to understand how the changes around climate, what it means to them and what it could do for their future, whether they go to college or they go right into a career. So the components of the seal, and Karen already said this, but I'll just reiterate it. There's two coursework pieces. One is just a science course that can actually be part of the high school science requirements that are in the state of Colorado. The second is a second course that has climate literacy standards embedded in it. And that could be another science course. It could also be a social studies course or a political science course. It could be art. It's very expansive, because again, the seal wants to connect with students where they are. And then what Karen described so well, and that I think Durango is really leading on, is this experiential learning project-based component. And the reason that's in there, and it's very expansive in the legislation, like all the different ways that a student can achieve that project. It could be, as Karen said, an internship. It could be an apprenticeship. It could be a capstone. It could be a project that's on their own ranch or in a river near their home. It doesn't have to be enormous. It just has to be something that's connected to their community and something that they can then speak out on. So those are the only two elements of what is required from the projects. And that's important for two reasons. One is that we know with students and kids and youth today, the anxiety they have around climate and what's happening to the climate is it's a mental health crisis. And so what the seal does by creating that makes it close to home, so you can see and actually understand you can impact what's happening. And it also is having other people listen to you. And we know for youth, for them to be heard and listened to in this moment, because they are going to be guiding us and they are going to be the leaders around this issue, are so important. The other thing that I don't know if you heard in what Karen said, but is really important in the way that this has been structured, is there are not climate stated standards in the seal. It really is up to a school district to look at the norms and the culture and the social pieces in their own community, trusting educators, trusting education leaders like Dr. Chesser, to say, this is what this means in Durango. This is what this means in Yampa Valley for some of our other sites. We can define what this means. We know what resonates most with our youth, and let us have the agency to do this on our own. And so I think that's two of the innovations that are actually part of this legislation.
Can
Mary and Karen. Oh, please, yeah,
I was
go
gonna
ahead.
say, Taylor, if you don't mind, if I was going to just read something that the students wrote, if you don't mind. So they tried to take information about the seal and do a fact sheet for other students to encourage them to get on board. And I thought this was beautiful. A couple of the things on their fact sheet that gives credence to this idea of the seal. They said, we deserve an education. Climate change is inarguably the greatest crisis our world faces today. We will live in the future that climate change creates. We will live in energy efficient homes, drive electric cars, and survive erratic weather. We deserve to learn how to live in tomorrow's world. Still, that future is not predestined or unchangeable. We will decide it. Engaging in service projects related to the climate and being encouraged to do so by our state's government will allow us to create the future we want to live in. I just thought that said it all about why this was so important.
Karen, thank you so much for sharing that. And, I think that actually summarizes 3 through points that you both talked about that I just want to elevate for the audience. Is the first is experiential learning. Mary, what you just said is that people can actually go learn and see themselves doing this work, not only in a formalized partnership with an employer that you're working with, but potentially in their backyard or on their ranch or in a river. And I just think that that is really critically important. The second piece that you all mentioned, and Karen, you just said, is the service element of this. I was in a conversation on a different sector of national security, but a lot of overlap. And it was the same thing of young people feeling like they need to see themselves in these jobs that are going to be so critical for our country's sustainability and advancement. And then lastly, I just think it's the state policy piece of it all, and the fact that there's a coalition around this work, so it can really be scaled and influence more young people. So I just want to thank you both for that, and I think it's really exciting and innovative. And in that same note, Mary, I want to pass it back to you to kind of speak to that scale piece before Karen going back to you and kind of hearing more from the student perspective. Mary, as a nonprofit, Lyra, you're working with all different regions across the state. You want this work to be scaled. You know that the seal is a potential way to do that. How do you see it helping to really see that advancement of this work? How could it also help in creating and sustaining some of these partnerships that are so critical to move this work forward? Do you see it incentivizing, work with districts and industry and community partners, or what's the generally role that you see it playing in this space?
Great questions and things that we really think about because, we want, and it matters to have the impact with one student, one school, one district, but we do think that this really becomes powerful and most impactful when it's happening in a lot of places and there's a way to actually connect and interconnect students, especially around these projects and what they're doing. So, we started this with Durango. Like Karen's district is the very first district that this really started in. And Durango helped expand it to 4 other districts. So we're in that region. They are now, I think, 12, Karen, maybe 10 to 12 districts. We then sort of took this model that was happening in Southwest Colorado, and we then took it to other parts of the state. So it's now working with 20 different school districts, many higher ed partners, many industries, to really say, what does this mean? And even in one state, there are all of these different elements to it and the way people view this. And these industries are all very different, even though they're all rural. And so from that learning, we then said, how do we interconnect this? How do we actually create some shared vision around our state? And that really is the purpose of the seal. It's the policy piece that goes, beyond what one student is doing, and then really does help create this shared narrative and this shared work throughout our state of Colorado. And Senator Hansen mentioned some of this. There's been other interesting pieces in other state, but nothing exactly like this and like the seal of climate literacy, and the fact that it does, intersect with industry and jobs and green jobs and jobs of the future and all of those different pieces. And so we've had other states that are really interested in seeing if this could be replicated. And so we've had outreach from 18 states that would like to see some version of this. And so, our goal is to help partners in these other places learn from Colorado. We see Colorado as a proof point. And even though any state sees a state that's like, this is so different than us, our rural communities do have a lot of commonality, no matter what state we're in. And there's a commonality around values and connection to land, connection to the environment that those of us that are in urban areas care about, but their daily life is impacted by extreme weather events. It's impacted by fire. It's impacted by shifts in the energy economy. And so while the issues may be different and the economies may be different, I think those values and those connections are very similar. And we want to kind of elevate what we've done here in Colorado because we think there is applications in other places. Our view at Lyra is that we're here to help, and we're actually looking and talking to multiple other states around expanding. We know that would take, I think this gets to your partnership question, Taylor, we know that would then take really deep partners who have much relationships that are very place-based oriented the way we are here in Colorado to say and guide and like, can we create this and do this in other places? And so we're interested in kind of elevating that story. That's why we're so grateful to PPI and 74 for today and helping us do this, because we want more kids to have this opportunity. And we also have partners that are doing work in other states. And we think that we can sort of working with them, expand the concept of the seal, expand the work that's around green jobs, green skills, student leadership, and these rural collaboratives. We have partners that are working on that even more deeply than we are. And we just are trying to bring it all together in something that we think is incredibly impactful and transformational for kids.
Thank you, Mary, so much. And you know, something you both have said, again, this idea of local and making sure that policy is really incentivizing quality and strong outcomes, but also really allowing districts, regional leaders to tailor programs that most meet their needs. So Mary, I really love that point that you made. It's like, yes, let's replicate, let's make this applicable in other states and maybe even look nationally eventually once we see how it's working. But then how do we also create this opportunity for different contexts, which we know exists across different states in the country? So that's really important. So thanks for saying that.
For sure. And we think we don't have a model, we have an approach and we have different tools that we use, but we think it is about creating that local context, and that has to just be entrusted to people in communities to define what that means and what that means to them. And that's how this really moves forward. And I think I said this earlier, or Senator Hansen said it, but this has become shockingly apolitical when we're talking about the future of youth, when we're talking about economic resilience. That is much less politically divisive, and why I think we've been actually able to really like advance very powerful conversations around climate in many communities that have not been able to have these conversations before.
Thanks, Mary, for that. Karen, I'm going to pass to you next, because I think, Mary, you did such a great job of talking about kind of the state level work. And we're going to come back local again a little bit. You know, Karen, you just mentioned student stories and experiences and how important this work is even to the students that you're serving in Durango. Can you talk more about not only how the seal will impact your students, but also how it will impact the community? And also feel free to weigh in too on this partnership piece, because I know you mentioned you're really at the head of this work for your area. And how has that been working with other partners like industry and higher education? And how have you been able to maintain those partnerships to really create these pathways programs?
Okay, great. Well, okay, there's a lot of questions in that one. So I'll start with
I know I give a lot to you. I'm sorry.
That's all right. So first of all, I think, how does it impact our community? Well, when the students are engaged in projects, they're not just doing it to do a project. I mean, their whole goal is to make an impact and to make a difference. So whether it be just a couple of examples, you know, again, some students in the green team, and now I think they're calling it Climate Good Trouble or something. They have a network, you know, it's the green team, it's the women's leadership group. Now we've got several different groups working together to work on the kinds of projects that would be recognized in this seal. So we have students doing everything from coming to school board meetings and advocating for solar, to students going to middle and elementary schools and mentoring those students and helping them get started on their plans, to, you know, even going to Denver and testifying for this bill. So those are some examples of that. I would say of course, that's making an impact in the greater community. So it's not just about, even though Durango School District actually covers 1,100 square miles, but it's not just our rural and mountain resort town area. I mean, this is going to have far-reaching impacts, we hope, in the whole state. But I just want to give an example of a project that one student has been engaged in at our Big Picture High School for 4 years. That is also an example of one that can have a huge impact. So Michaela, and Michaela wouldn't mind if I say her name. We're just so proud of this project. The Big Picture High School model actually has students working in internships every Tuesday and Thursday. So it's a unique model, non-traditional. And when Michaela started, she thought she might want to go into cosmetology. So she went to a salon to work that freshman year internship, decided she absolutely hated it. But you know what she loved? Taking care of the plants there. And she got so excited about learning more about plant science that she has become an expert on hydroponics. Not only has she created her own hydroponics tables, she's been doing this training with others now for 4 years. She mentors students in our middle and high school and the elementary schools. She actually is helping our food services department use hydroponics to grow their own greens for our cafeterias. And so Michaela will be graduating this year. She actually is now in our student. We have 4 school board members that are students, and she's one of those. Again, and so she's taking this idea of how can I make a difference in, first of all, just in my school, and then expanding it to an entire district, now feeding 5,000 students, to now taking that to the next level and, pursuing a post-secondary degree to really focus on this. I think we'll see some patents from Michaela here in a few years, as well as articles and research with this full-on, vision to find ways to grow without, the types of byproducts that could happen when you're trying to grow. So small spaces, places where you typically can't grow food, helping students, young children understand the impact of food and food production. And then she's also been working with, we have a new program called this Soil Lab. It's Sustainability Outdoor Inspiration Lab, which could be a whole session. So I'm not going to go too much into that. But it's also this amazing garden and compost stations and grow domes. And Michaela has been a huge instrumental part of that. So those are just some examples of the kind of community impact kids can have. And we're doing that also, through the collaborative. We are all of our school districts and superintendents and higher ed partners and industry partners are working diligently to share ideas, not to create overlaps, to make sure all of our students have opportunity access. I know I'll just quickly answer the question that was in the Q&A about work-based learning. So one of the things that we're doing as a region, again, we have limited resources, and we all can't be going to the same industry people and saying, hey, well, you'll do an internship and that kind of thing. So as a region, we have created an online platform, work-based learning platform. We call it Career Launch Southwest. We worked with a developer. We had an anonymous donor that helped us with this. And so now all of our industries can input into the system all the types of work-based learning opportunities they are able to offer, whether it's job shadows, virtual tours, co-ops, or full-on apprenticeships or internships. Maybe it's a guest speaker. And they put that in the system. And then all of our students across our entire region then have access to those, so that then it doesn't matter if you're even in the most rural part of our state or up a mountain pass. I'm in Silverton today. You can see the beautiful mountains back here. You know, it could be winter. You can't get up here. The passes are closed. So it doesn't matter. Everyone has opportunity and access. And so that's been, that's a great example of everyone working together, everybody being regional stewards, and you can make so much more happen when you do that.
Karen, I want to pick up on something you said and so exciting about your career at Launch Southwest. You know, one of the things I think about as we think about talent development and employers are slamming their heads against the wall saying we need talent now is a lot of these jobs that are coming, people don't even know about or students don't see themselves in. So I love this idea that you all have created this online tool to really help young people navigate, but also help employers better communicate these opportunities down to the next generation. Because I do think we can talk about skill and skill development a lot, which is critically important. And also we know like academic learning and tying that together, but we have to make sure people even know that these opportunities are available to them. So I think that's a missing piece of the policy discussion often. So I appreciate you raising that because I think it's really important. Mary, I did just want to pass to you. I know, I know you're working with other hubs across the state. So before we move to our next question, I did just want to see if you wanted to lift up any kind of regional stories or student stories that you've heard from your other partners.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to pick because they're all so different and unique. You know, one thing that's really interesting is in Leadville, like we call it a hub, but really it's a student-led, student-generated effort and work. It's just a single district, and it's been students that originally participated in something that was through Fort Lewis College, which is in Durango. Karen mentioned them earlier, called the Environment and Climate Institute, as middle schoolers. And then they sort of came out of their community, drove, I don't know, Karen, how far Leadville is from Durango, but it's 3.5 hours, maybe.
Probably 5.
5. Okay. I drive very fast, so I don't know. Maybe it's too fast for me. But they have then progressed from starting as middle schoolers and moving all the way now to, sorry, I don't know if I froze for a second, but starting in middle school. And then they ended up being some of the students that testified for the Seal of Climate Literacy. So their entire most of their middle and entire high school career, they have been involved in climate work. They have been involved in looking. And so that was one hub. We have an amazing hub in Yampa Valley that's multiple school districts there and 2 higher ed partners. It's a big region of the state, and they are focusing on many different pieces. One of the communities in that partnership and collaborative is really dealing with energy transitions. 2 others are really looking at agriculture and this shift to regenerative agriculture. We had incredible students from South Routt County come and speak, and it was a very different experience than some of our students from even Durango. And they talked about this connection to land, this connection as ranching kids and wanting to stay on their ranches. And it was really powerful in their testimony, all the way to Steamboat Springs, which people that are skiers, even if you're not in the state of Colorado, know this is the tourism industry and the ski industry is key to them. And so all of those very different communities come together in a collaborative that Southwest Colorado started. They've adopted that framework and they're doing it there. And they come because water is affecting all of them. So that is affecting ranching and that is affecting the ski industry. Energy and sort of what does it mean and look like? And I think what maybe some people know, but not everyone, is that the coal mining industry is a very values driven. It's created incredible economic opportunities for people in this community. And so as these energies transition, how do we make sure there's not only jobs, but quality jobs? And how do you actually ensure that there's a middle class lifestyle that coal mining has really provided for people? We have to be thinking not only about a replacement, but really how do we ensure that same quality standpoint? So the Yampa Valley Partnership has looked at that. We have a Western Slope partnership that is looking at outdoor recreation, as is actually Durango. So there's crossover, there's differences. One of the things that's really intriguing and interesting about the rural collaboratives, even separate from the climate work, and Karen also talked about this, you can put other pathways, you can build those in there. Once you've created a coalition of multiple rural school districts who are committed to thinking about economies of scale and doing things for students they couldn't do individually because they're just too small, there is so much you can do around healthcare, around construction, around different fields. what we would say at Lyra, because we are so connected on the climate piece, all of those fields need to become green. All of those jobs need to have green skills, whether technical green skills or durable green skills embedded in them. So for a construction trades program, what does that mean for solar panels? Weatherization is a massive potential need in our economy in Colorado right now, much coming from some of these incentives that are coming from the federal government. So those are pieces that, you know, are existing pathways in a lot of places that but can be green skilled and green jobs. And you know, there are many people working on this. Lyra is one of them, and we're trying to actually really sort of help not just have this conceptually, but on the ground, implementation wise, like what do these districts need to actually be providing that? So long way of saying our hubs are all very different, but there is this commonality, and the power of rural communities coming together in rural school districts creates so much more for students, for these economies, but for teachers and educators who sometimes you're the only environmental science teacher in your whole district. So if you can be working with other districts, you can meet a colleague, you know, who can work with you and help you. And so we want to really incentivize that as well and create these great collaboratives. And there's just no example better than Southwest. So I'm so glad Karen's here. But it really, that was the first for us in Colorado. And others have taken that model and adapted it, but it's super powerful. And hopefully others will look at it.
Thanks, Mary. And, you know, one thing I wanted to say when you were talking about some of the industry pieces and some of the industry transitions, you know, I think something that we talked about in prep calls and our conversations is that, yes, this is the right thing for our society. It's the right thing for our environment. It's the right thing for our young people. But also as we think about industry and how a lot of these industry leaders are going to be transitioning into a greener job or a greener skill set for their workers, or something like coal, where there has been decline because of other innovations in the space. But how do you ensure that, one, you know, I know that's a little tangential to this conversation, you know, reskill current workers to be prepared for those jobs, but also then how do you prepare younger talent for these opportunities? And how is that a regional economic development strategy as employers look at these different rural regions, look at supporting them, look at coming there? What can be really attractive to that? So I know it's not just about obviously the industry implications, but I think that's a really good point, Mary, you made, is like how these sectors are transitioning and what that means too for rural economic development and who might come to your area and who might no longer be there. And how does also educating the community really drive industry partnerships and kind of growth in that area. So I think that's really important piece of this work that you all are doing.
For sure. And I think so often, you know, when you look at jobs data and jobs report and where are the current jobs, sometimes it doesn't look down the road enough. And I think one of the opportunities as we think about green jobs and green skills, you know, we really need to be questioning, like, what is this economy going to look like 10 years from now? What's it going to look like 5 years from now? Like, we're not talking about very long. And so this is relevant. And, you know, I live in Denver, you know, I do a lot of work in rural communities. My heart is there. But, you know, rural communities are really, we can't underline this enough. Like, this is happening right now. Like, Durango looks different than it did 10 years ago now. And this isn't in the future. And so the relevancy, the necessity, the urgency really is in rural more than anywhere. When we did something like the SEAL, the great thing is it's statewide, and we have so many students in Denver that we know are going to access this. With Jefferson County, our more urban districts, this is a great benefit to these students as well. What I think is so just, I don't know, for me, it's very energizing and heartwarming even, is that the students that we had come testify about this, these are kids in rural communities. I mean, the students that came from Durango and spoke to it, the students from South Routt County, we had kids coming from charters that are really focused on agriculture. Like, these were not always the students that you think would show up in this moment to testify on this. And we had one other little piece I'll say, the hubs, each of them have created their own name, and the adults have created their own language. So they don't use climate. Like, I talked about Yampa Valley, it's the Yampa Valley Partnership for Student Stewardship and Sustainability. They didn't use the word climate. And what is really interesting to me is we want to support that. We want to support that local ownership and that language development and how that's built. The Seal of Climate Literacy, intentionally, the word climate was put in there because this is communicating directly to youth who, whether they're more liberal or conservative or moderate, are much more comfortable talking about climate. They don't see this as political. And this is climate literacy. Like, this is not, it's not a political movement. It's really about, how do I stay in my community? And the rural students and educators that came to speak on behalf of this show this is a statewide issue, and this is not just a liberal progressive issue. So just wanted to kind of highlight the importance that they've played in making this bipartisan. This came out of the House Education Committee, voted on a bipartisan level. And I just don't think you see that around climate issues in a lot of states.
You do not. And that's why we're talking about it today, because I think it is really powerful. Dr. Chess, before I move to the next question, did want to see if you had anything to add on to that, because I know we asked a few additional questions in there.
No, I think she said it perfectly. Mary did. Our employers now, it's hard. I'm hard pressed to think of an industry that isn't concerned about climate, that isn't concerned about sustainability. It doesn't have some green skill aspect of their job, whether it's in manufacturing. Right now, we have a company, Timber Age, that is manufacturing wood and manufacturing homes with a clear focus on how do we do this in the most sustainable way possible. I mean, just every industry has something like that, whether it's, the airline industry or whether it's our farmers and ranchers, manufacturing. And so forestry, of course, is really important in our area. So these are definitely skills that every student really is going to need, every adult, every person.
Well, you both are so impressive, and the work that you're doing is so impressive. And I'm so glad we had the chance to talk about it today. Because it's really not happening in enough places. And if it is, I think Mary and Karen, such good points where it's led by one group and it's not really this collective effort that you're seeing in Colorado and in these regions we've highlighted today. But what I want to ask you both is our last really official question. How can we continue to build awareness of this work you're doing? How can we replicate these efforts and other pathway initiatives in other places? And how do you believe we can see real scale so more young Americans have access to high quality career learning and experiences in the energy sector and other sectors being impacted by the climate conversation we're having today? So I'd love to hear more of just maybe some of your policy asks or wants for the future to really make this a reality in more places.
Yeah, I mean, Karen will have like national ideas too. Like, so these are just mine. I think there's a few different ways. One, in Colorado, this very intentionally started again in these small communities and built itself up to policy. I often think we think first policy and then we hope, cross our fingers, that this will actually have applications on the ground. And it just honestly doesn't always happen that way, and often doesn't happen that way, because we don't have the voices of people that are then feel ownership over this and can really communicate about it in a practical, how does this impact my daily life kind of way. And so I think that's one lesson to take. I do think other states can pass this policy and the seal of climate literacy, and LIRA is happy to help. I think there are partners that could already do that. If we can advise on that, we will more than happy to sort of be a partner. And then you could kind of backwards map to, I think, communities. So I think there's different ways to do it. We took this local to policy approach, but I think other states can also point to the work that's happened here in Colorado to also create that resonance. Regardless, and this is just my belief, you need to have a community-based approach, voices, advocates for this. And so regardless of whether you start there or in there, you have to have intentionality to make that happen. And I think that helps our kids, because these issues do seem overwhelmingly big. Like, sometimes when you talk about climate change, people are thinking about this as something that's happening on a different continent, and you see the impacts and the displacements of people or animals, and it feels overwhelming, and it is so enormous. I think taking it to one student and a project they can do on the riverbanks of the Animas River, or that they can do in a forest, or they can do on their ranch, it not only gives them a sense of agency, that story is compelling to other kids and other youth. And so the other way to spread this is simply to have youth hear what other youth are doing in other places. And that's not just something that LIRA wants to do. I think there are a lot of organizations that are already trying to figure that out. And so we would love for the Colorado stories to really, inform that, be part of that big narrative. And that's when I think we really get to systemic change. We actually connect these kids to each other and their stories and experiences to one another.
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes, a ditto to everything that Mary said. I do think that we could work with some national organizations that are committed to climate literacy, whether that be the U.S. Forestry Council or other sort of national organizations, national parks. But also we do have some education organizations that would be great to involve. The North American Association for Environmental Ed, NAAEE. They also have, I'm the Colorado rep for the Superintendent's Environmental Education Collaborative. There's a rep in every single state, and working through that so that people in districts around, school districts around the country can share ideas. There's Project Learning Tree, Project WET, Project Wild, all of these different curricula that these ideas could be embedded in that the students could share, or 4-H, you think about existing organizations that it would be, much more efficient and productive if we all were working on some of the same projects instead of everyone sort of reinventing the wheel. Definitely a firm believer in sharing ideas. We do have national education conferences every year. Getting these ideas on sessions in each of those, just a little bit at a time. And then our students, again, they do amazing work. I think we involve them as well. Do they need to testify on a national level? Do they need to start at their post-secondary institution if they go, or to their workplace, maybe some sort of initiative at their work? So there's so much potential. But I think doing things like this, Taylor, and the 74 getting the word out. I saw someone was here from the Getting Smart maybe podcast group. Just the more we can get the word out. And I want to invite everyone to come to Durango and see some of the work yourself. And we can, do that, share across the country and see what's happening.
I think you both, thank you for sharing those ideas. I think it's so true. And I'll do the plug of, I really do believe, and this is something I know Mary and Karen, you're both working on, is like the reinvention and rethinking of our K-12 systems as well. You all are already doing this and creating these pathways opportunity, but still that's not happening in enough places. So how can we really encourage our education systems to be able to provide that, knowing that there's, that takes a lot of capacity and resources that usually aren't easily available, and also those partnerships that we know are critical for that. So I think ways that policy at the state and federal level can really encourage more of that through investment, through encouraging partnerships, through creating testing and competitive grant programs that can really test these new models and thinking, so we know what works and then we can really scale it, I think is going to be critically important. And so I'm so happy that Colorado is already spearheading a lot of this, so national leaders can look to you all as they think about their next steps and efforts. So with that, 2 minutes left, final round. I just want to give you both a chance to say any, rapid fire, any final thoughts that you'd like to leave the audience with today, including a point or a policy idea that may have not been covered this far.
Well, I'll go first. I just want to echo what Karen said, and also Taylor, to thank you. Thank you for the op-ed you did, really lifting up the Colorado story and just the work of PPI and the 74. I think we think a lot about policy and we think about legislation. There's also policy that can happen at the administrative level or executive level within state government. And so excited for work like Jobs for the Future and JFF and the work they've been doing. We have been sort of thinking like, what could a shared definition be around green jobs and green skills? And how do we come together on that, so that there's this common language? And so we want to have this very local piece, but we do need to have some of these steps so that we can access some of these opportunities and grant opportunities that are coming through the federal government right now around things like weatherization and others. So don't just think about policy with a big P, but think about policy with a lowercase p. That would be one thought.
I love that, Mary. Dr. Tesser, last words.
So my last word is trust those honey badgers. That's all I got to say. They're going to change our world for the better. tackle all the wicked problems. We just got to have to give them the tools and get out of their way.
Well, I think that is the best way to end today's conversation. And I just want to thank you both for not only providing your expertise and insights for this past hour, but also leaving me feeling very positive about our future and very positive about our next generation. So I am looking forward to everything that you're doing to educate and help them have increased economic opportunity while also helping our wonderful country and climate. Thank you both again so much. And thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.